The front desk clerk said his name out loud before I even saw his face, and that's the part I still can't get over, that I heard it before I saw him, and my whole body reacted like it had been waiting 9 years for someone to say it again. Weston, party of one, you're in 214, and oh, funny, looks like your neighbor in 213 checked in about 20 minutes ago. Small world, you two have the same last initial on your reservations, ha. I wasn't even listening to her. I was watching the little printer spit out my key card and thinking about how tired my feet were and whether the vending machine on this floor took cards or cash. I was not thinking about Nolan Reyes. I hadn't thought about Nolan Reyes in, okay, that's a lie, I thought about him more than I want to admit, but not in a real way. In a museum way. Like a photograph you keep in a drawer, not because you look at it, but because throwing it away feels like throwing away a version of yourself. I took the elevator up to the second floor with my duffel bag digging into my shoulder, and I was so deep in my own head, replaying the entire flight delay, the guy next to me who wouldn't stop clearing his throat, whether I'd left the stove on, normal boring adult things, that I almost didn't notice the guy standing outside room 213, patting his pockets like he'd locked himself out. I noticed the jacket first. Green canvas, one of those thrifted military-style ones with a little tear near the cuff that somebody had stitched badly on purpose, like it was a feature and not a flaw. Then I noticed that the guy wearing it was looking at me. And then I noticed that I knew that face the way you know your own hands. "No way," he said, and he said it flat, almost annoyed, like the universe had personally inconvenienced him. No way. I didn't say anything. I actually just stood there holding my duffel bag like it was a shield. "Adrian," he said, and hearing my name out of his mouth after 9 years did something to my chest that I don't have a clean way to describe. It wasn't butterflies, it was more like pressure. Like something had been folded up small for a long time and was trying to unfold all at once and didn't fit anymore. "Hey," I said, just that, hey, 9 years, and the best I could come up with was hey. He laughed, but it wasn't a real laugh, it was the kind you do when you don't know what else to do with your face. "This is insane. This is, okay, this is actually insane, I have to sit down." "You don't have a key," I said, because apparently my brain had decided the safest thing to comment on was his door situation. "Yeah, no, he checked his pockets again, dumbly, even though we both knew it wasn't there. "I think I left it at the front desk when the guy was explaining the Wi-Fi password to me. I wasn't listening, I was thinking about something else. I wanted to ask what. I didn't ask what. I just stood there in the hallway of a Best Western outside Sacramento, 41 years old. No, sorry, I was 26 then. I keep doing that. I do the math wrong every time I tell this story because it still doesn't feel like it happened to the person I am now, 26 years old. Standing 3 feet from the person I used to think about so hard in 11th grade that I gave myself stomach aches. "I should let you go get your key," I said. "Yeah," he said, "yeah, probably." Neither of us moved. I want to back up because if I don't explain what he was to me back then, none of this is going to land the way it landed for me in that hallway. Nolan and I had AP Bio together junior year, and I don't even remember how it started. I just remember that by October I was rearranging my whole schedule of thoughts around him without meaning to. He had this way of asking questions in class that weren't really about the material. They were about whatever weird tangent his brain had wandered off to, and the teacher would get annoyed but everyone else would lean in, because Nolan's tangents were always more interesting than mitochondria. He wasn't the loudest guy in school or the most obviously good-looking guy in school. He was just specific. Like everything about him was chosen on purpose, even the stuff that looked accidental. We became friends the normal way, lab partners, then texting about homework, then texting about not homework, then it was midnight and we were still texting and I was lying in the dark with my phone 6 inches from my face memorizing the rhythm of how he typed. I never told him. I want to be really clear about that because I think people hear high school crush and they imagine some big tragic almost romance, and it wasn't that. It was one-sided, or at least I thought it was one-sided, for 2 straight years. I was so far in the closet I hadn't even found the light switch yet. My family wasn't the kind where I could test the waters. My dad used the word "those people" about a news story once at dinner, and I remember excusing myself to the bathroom and sitting on the edge of the tub for 10 minutes just breathing. So I never told Nalan anything. I just loved him quietly and badly, the way you love someone when you've decided in advance that nothing can ever come of it. Senior year, his family moved to Arizona in February out of nowhere. His dad got transferred. We had exactly one conversation about it, in the school parking lot, both of us leaning against his mom's car, and I remember he said something like, "This is so stupid, I finally figured out this town and now I have to start over." And I said something equally useless back, and then he hugged me, a real hug, the kind that lasts 1 second too long, and got in the car, and that was it. We texted for maybe 2 months after that. Then it just stopped. The way things stop when you're 18 and your whole life is reorganizing itself and you don't yet understand that some doors close so quietly you don't hear the click. I hadn't seen his face in 9 years, not even a photo. He wasn't on any of the social media I used, or if he was, I'd never looked because looking felt like admitting something. And now he was standing outside room 213 in a torn green jacket, locked out, laughing that fake laugh, and I was realizing that the stomachache feeling had never actually gone away. It had just been asleep. "I'm gonna go deal with this," he said finally, gesturing vaguely toward the elevator. "The key thing." "Yeah. You're in," he glanced at my door. 214, I said. Something moved across his face, quick there and gone, right next door. "Right next door," I said, and my voice came out weirder than I meant it to, higher, like the words had extra weight in them that I hadn't given them permission to have. He didn't say anything else. He just nodded once like he was filing something away and walked toward the elevator, and I let myself into 214 and sat down on the very edge of the bed and did not move for probably 4 full minutes. Here's the thing about being an adult who used to be a closeted teenager. You get very good at having entire emotional events happen completely silently, inside your own skull while your face does nothing. I sat on that bed and I was screaming internally, genuinely, some kind of static why panic joy grief thing all mixed together, and outwardly I was just a guy sitting on a hotel bed. I texted my best friend Priya. I typed, "You will not believe who is staying in the room next to me," and then I deleted it and typed, "Okay, this is going to sound insane," and deleted that too, and finally just called her because I didn't trust my thumbs. "He's here," I said the second she picked up. Nolan Ray's, he's in 213, I'm 214, we are at the same conference, what are the actual odds?" "Wait, Nolan, bio class 9 years ago, Nolan, the one you wrote that unsent letter to freshman year of college. You weren't supposed to remember the letter." "I remember everything, that's my whole personality." "Okay, breathe, what happened, did you talk, are you dying?" I said, "Hey, that's it, that's the whole interaction." He said my name like it hurt him to say it, and I said, "Hey," and now I'm sitting on a bed listening to the ice machine down the hall like it's going to give me advice. Priya laughed so hard she started coughing. "Okay, well, what are you gonna do?" "Nothing. I'm gonna go to my sessions tomorrow and eat the bad conference eggs and pretend a wall isn't the only thing between me and the entire unresolved plotline of my adolescence." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. I want to tell you I stuck to that plan, I did not stick to that plan." That night I lay in bed with the TV on mute just for the light of it, and around 11 I heard faintly through the wall someone's phone playing music. Not loud, just enough to bleed through. And I recognized the song, some acoustic thing, a band called Bright Eyes that Nolan used to play constantly senior year. He made me a playlist once on a USB drive because he said Spotify links didn't feel personal enough. And I still have that USB drive in a drawer in my apartment that I have never once plugged into anything because I was afraid of what it would do to me to hear it. I lay there and listened to the muffled outline of a song I used to know every word to, coming through a hotel wall from the person who used to play it, and I thought, this is either the most romantic thing that has ever happened to me or the most pathetic, and I genuinely could not tell which. I didn't sleep well. The next morning I went down for the free breakfast at 7:15 specifically, because I'd convinced myself he wouldn't be up that early. He was never a morning person. He used to fall asleep during first period with his eyes half open. It was a whole bit, and of course, he was sitting at a two-top table by the window with a paper plate of scrambled eggs, scrolling his phone, hair doing something complicated and unbothered on top of his head. He looked up before I could turn around and pretend I'd forgotten something in my room. "You're an early riser now," he said. "That's new, you used to text me at 1 a.m. asking if I thought online school would be less soul-crushing. You remember that?" "I remember a lot of things," he said, and something in his tone made it not a throwaway line, and I didn't know what to do with that, so I just stood there holding a paper cup of coffee like an idiot until he kicked the chair across from him out from under the table with his foot. "Sit down, Adrian, I don't bite." I sat down. We didn't talk about anything big at first. We talked about the conference, which was some marketing thing neither of us particularly cared about. He worked for a nonprofit doing outreach stuff. I did something in project management that I have never successfully explained to my own mother. And we talked about the bad coffee and a guy from the keynote who'd said synergy 4 times in one sentence, and it was easy, it was so easy. Easier than I remembered anything with him ever being. Except every few minutes there'd be this little silence where neither of us said anything and I could feel both of us deciding not to say the actual thing. It was him who finally said it, over cold eggs, out of absolutely nowhere. "I looked you up once," he said. "Like 2 years ago. I didn't message you or anything, I looked. Your job's on LinkedIn, there's a picture from some 5K you did, you looked happy. I looked up your Instagram probably 20 times over the years and never followed you," I admitted, "because I didn't want you to see that I looked." He set his fork down. "Why not?" And there it was, the actual thing, sitting right there on the table between the little packets of jam. I didn't answer right away. I looked out the window at the parking lot, at a guy loading suitcases into a minivan, at absolutely nothing that mattered, and then I said quietly, "Because I didn't know how to explain why I still thought about you so much if I was supposed to be over you." He went very still. "I thought that was just me," he said. "What?" The still thinking about it thing. He picked his fork back up just to have something to do with his hands, and put it back down again without eating anything. I used to think I made up half of it in my head, honestly. Like maybe I invented some version of junior year that was more intense than it actually was because I needed it to mean something, because everything else about that year was falling apart. My parents were fighting all the time before the move, and you were just easy. You were the one easy thing. And then I left and I never told you what that meant to me, and I just assumed you didn't feel it the same way because you never said anything, and I figured, okay, that's that. I read too much into a friendship, that's embarrassing, moving on. My heart was doing something violent in my chest. I didn't say anything because I was terrified, I said. Not of you, of everything. I wasn't out. I wasn't anywhere close to out. I used to write things in my notes app and delete them before I finished the sentence. You could have told me, he said, and there was something almost hurt in it. 9 years later. I wouldn't have, Adrian, I would never have made that weird for you. I know that now, I didn't know it then. I was 17 and terrified, and you were the only good thing in a really bad year, and I was so scared that saying it out loud would break it that I just didn't. And then you left, and then there wasn't a version of me left to say it to anymore. You were just gone, and I told myself it didn't matter because nothing had actually happened. He was quiet for a second, then he said, "Something happened even if we never said it, something happened." I didn't have a response to that, I just nodded. Because if I opened my mouth I genuinely didn't know what would come out. And a woman with a lanyard walked past our table talking loudly about the 9 a.m. breakout session, and the moment cracked open into the ordinary noise of a hotel breakfast room, and neither of us picked it back up right then. We just finished eating in a silence that wasn't uncomfortable exactly. It was more like both of us needed a minute to sit with what had just gotten said out loud after 9 years of not saying it. The conference sessions that day were useless to me. I sat in a room about quarterly reporting metrics and did not absorb a single fact. I kept replaying "something happened even if we never said it" on a loop, turning it over like a stone in my pocket. We ended up at dinner together that night, not officially planned. We just both drifted toward the same taco place 2 blocks from the hotel because apparently we still had the same taste in cheap good food, which felt like a small miracle in itself. And somewhere between the second basket of chips and the check, the conversation got less careful. "Are you seeing anyone?" he asked, point blank, no runway into it at all, which was so like him, the same guy who used to ask the teacher weird tangential questions with zero warning. "No," I said, "you." There was someone. It ended in the spring. It wasn't bad, it just wasn't right. I think I knew pretty early it wasn't right, and I stayed anyway because starting over is exhausting, and also because I think some small stupid part of my brain kept comparing everyone to a person I hadn't seen since high school, which in retrospect is an insane thing to admit to that actual person's face over tacos. I put my drink down slower than necessary just to have a second. "You're not the only one who's done that." "Yes. Yeah." He looked at me for a long moment, and I wanted to describe his face at that moment, but honestly I couldn't tell you exactly what it looked like because I was too busy trying to keep my own face from doing something embarrassing. What I remember is the quality of the silence. It wasn't awkward, it was full. "This is a weird thing to say," he said eventually, "but I almost didn't come to this conference. I had a whole excuse ready for my boss family thing, I was gonna bail, and then like 4 days ago I just changed my mind. No real reason. I don't know if I believe in signs or whatever, I'm not that guy, but I keep thinking about the fact that out of every hotel in a city I've never been to, I ended up in the room next to yours. I believe in coincidences, I said. I don't know if I believe in signs either, but I keep thinking about the fact that I heard your name before I saw your face and something in me knew before the rest of me caught up. He reached across the table then, not dramatically, not like a movie, just his hand moving a couple inches toward mine on the sticky plastic tabletop, stopping just short like he was leaving the decision to me. And I looked at his hand and I looked at him and I thought about 17-year-old me sitting on the edge of a bathtub not breathing right because of a sentence at the dinner table. And I thought, I am not that scared anymore, or if I am, I'm done letting the scared part drive. I put my hand on top of his. Neither of us said anything for a second. His thumb moved once just barely across my knuckles. I'm really glad the hotel messed up the Wi-Fi guy's explanation, he said, which made no sense out loud, but I knew exactly what he meant, and I laughed, actually laughed, the real kind, not the hallway kind. We walked back to the hotel slower than we needed to. It was cooling off that early evening in between light, and neither of us was in a rush to get anywhere, which felt like its own kind of confession. At the elevator, waiting for it to come down from some high floor, he leaned against the wall and looked at me and said, I don't want this to be a conference thing, like a 2-day thing that we both feel weird about on the flight home. I need you to know that going in because I think I'd rather have never said anything at all than have you think that's what this is. It's not that for me either, I said, and my voice actually shook a little, which I hadn't expected. I've had 9 years of not saying things, I don't want to go back to that. The elevator doors opened and we got in and it was just us, and the doors slid shut, and for a second we just stood there in that small metal box looking at each other. Both of us clearly aware that something was about to happen and neither of us in a hurry to rush it, like we both understood without saying it that we'd waited long enough to earn taking this part slow. He reached out and tucked a piece of my hair back, which is a small thing, but my whole nervous system rerouted around that one gesture. Can I? He started, and I didn't let him finish the question, I just closed the distance. And he made this small surprise sound against my mouth like he hadn't actually expected me to move first. And then his hand was at the back of my neck and mine was fisted in that stupid torn green jacket, and the elevator dinged for the second floor and neither of us moved to get off. The doors opened, nobody was there, they started to close again. We pulled apart, both of us a little wrecked looking, both of us grinning like idiots, and he hit the door open button with his elbow without breaking eye contact. Floor's ours, he said. We walked out into the hallway between 213 and 214 and stood there, right at the spot where I'd first seen him patting his pockets for a key he didn't have. And I thought about how strange it was that the same square of hotel carpet had held both the panic of that first moment and this. Whatever this was, warm and terrifying and finally out in the open. I don't actually know whose room we're going to, he said, half laughing, still catching his breath a little. Does it matter? No, he said, I really don't think it does. I'm not going to walk you through the rest of that night in detail, because some things belong only to the people who lived them, but I'll tell you this. For the first time in 9 years, I fell asleep without that specific hollow feeling I didn't even realize I'd been carrying around, the one that lives in the space between the person you actually are and the person you let people see. We didn't fix everything in one conversation, obviously. That's not how any of this works, no matter what a video title promises you. We had a long, slightly terrifying talk the next morning about logistics. He lived 4 hours away, I had a lease, neither of us was about to make some grand cinematic decision after 48 hours, and we both said that out loud to each other carefully like handling something breakable. But we also said we wanted to try. Actually try. Not text occasionally try, real try. On the last morning, checking out, we stood in the lobby with our bags, and the same clerk who'd said his name out loud 2 days earlier smiled at us like she had absolutely no idea what she'd started. Same time next year, Nolan said, only half joking, bumping his shoulder into mine. I'm gonna hold you to that, I said. We hugged goodbye in the parking lot, and it lasted 1 second too long, same as it had 9 years earlier outside his mom's car. Except this time, right before he let go, he pulled back just enough to kiss me, quick, easy, like it was the most normal thing in the world, like we'd been doing it for years instead of 2 days. Text me when you land, he said. Actually text me, not like before. Every day, I said, I mean it. It's been 8 months since that conference. I'm writing this from his apartment, actually. We made it work. The 4-hour distance turned into a lot of weekend drives and one very stressful moving van. And he's in the next room right now making something that smells like it's going to be either incredible or a small kitchen fire. and every once in a while I still catch myself just watching him do something completely ordinary, loading a dishwasher, arguing with the TV remote, and thinking about the version of me who sat on the edge of a bathtub at 17 not breathing right, who never said the thing, who let a whole life almost go by unspoken. I think about how close I came to never knowing, if the front desk clerk hadn't said his name out loud, if he'd bilayed on that conference like he almost did, if either of us had just kept being too scared one more time the way we'd both been too scared for 9 straight years. Some people get their whole story in high school. Some people get it interrupted and have to wait a decade for the universe to put them back in the same hallway, close enough to finally say the thing. I don't know what I believe about fate, but I know that I heard his name before I saw his face, and something in me recognized it like a door creaking open that I thought had been shut for good. And I know that I'm not going to spend the rest of this story wondering what would have happened if I'd never said anything. This time I said it, and he was there on the other side of a thin hotel wall waiting to hear it too.